Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us for our February 13th Town Board Workshop meeting. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So tonight we have two presentations for our workshop. First, we have giving us a little overview of the census coming up. Our very own Norma Drummond, she is the chair of our zoning, East Fishkill Zoning Board of Appeals, and she's also the commissioner of the Westchester County Planning Department. With her will be Owen Rafter. He is our Dutchess County commissioner of our Dutchess County Planning Department. And second, we will have our own Michelle Robbins, our town planner, to answer Peter's phone. She will be giving us a presentation on our industrial land study that we've been working on for the past year. So we will have to adjoin to the audience so the screen could come down for them to do the presentation. And with that, Norma and Owen, come up.
Before or after?
Just show them and then
Yeah.
leave them here. All right, so. Are we good? Okay. So Census 2020 is coming. April 1st is officially Census Day. And one of the reasons it's important for people to get the response to the census and to understand why we're trying to get an accurate count is that the Census Bureau tells us for every person who does not respond, it's a loss to the local municipalities of $2,500 per person per year for the next 10 years. So just a loss of 400 people not being counted is $1 million a year. Okay, so it's definitely important for us to be able to do this. So, Owen, we're going to follow ahead. Go ahead.
So the census is mandated by the U.S. Constitution. It is one of the things we have to do, and it's done for a variety of reasons. Apportionment and redistricting to do the congressional representatives. Obviously, New York State has lost population that has directly affected that. It is one of the big reasons we use it. And then obviously, as we've talked, it's the distribution of federal funds. So there's over $880 billion public funds, 2,500 different programs, 26 different federal agencies. Transportation, education, food assistance, all of these federal programs are based on the numbers and the distribution that are shown within the Census Bureau. 2020 census, for the first time, has three ways that you can fill it out. You can do the form, mail it in. For the first time ever, you're going to be able to fill out the online. You can also do it by telephone. They are trying to get everyone to respond in one of those three ways to avoid having the census taker come to your door. Obviously, the most expensive part of this would be the enumerators or those census staff that would have to come to your door to try and gather this information. They are really encouraging and trying to get as many people to respond when you first do get that indication, being a postcard or mailer.
Actually, I'm going to step in with this one. The Census Bureau is actually going to be sending 95% of the households in this country an invitation to respond. You're actually not going to get a paper form. And that's what we have to communicate, particularly to our senior citizens who may have gotten forms for their entire lifetime at this point. They are not going to get a form unless there are certain circumstances, like they do not have a mailbox in front of their house. If they do not have a mailbox in the front of their house and they go to the post office to get their mail, that is one of the circumstances where an enumerator will actually come out and either take their census right then and there, or they'll actually drop the package off and then they'll get a paper form. But the Census Bureau has actually been told that they are not allowed to go to events with paper forms. They do not want people to be able to stuff the box or complete forms with false information. One of the advantages of the fact that many people, most of the country, will be responding online is that as early as March 20th, we will be able to see live time how the census responses are going, how they're coming in. Census tract by census tract, we will be able to see what the response rates are. And I can tell you, again, as Commissioner Planning for Westchester County, that there are areas that we call hard to count, and I'm sure Dutchess County has them as well, that there are areas that based on the last census, there are areas that had even lower than a 50% response rate from people returning the paper census. All right, and so that's one of the things we'll be able to watch this time around. We'll be able to call and people or be able to notify the Census Bureau, this census tract is really low, but there is this type of neighborhood in there, or this type of building that's in there. And generally speaking, the areas that are considered hard to count are generally multifamily areas. Okay, there are areas that have multifamily properties in them. I do like to tell this story because, especially since I'm in my hometown, I do like to tell a story about the fact I have raised 4 children in this town, okay, but I will not be able to count any of my 4 children, and my youngest is only 19. But my son and his wife are now married, so they live in their own house. They'll be counting themselves in their own private housing market. But my 3 daughters are all students. All right, my youngest is 19. She lives in a dorm in Washington, D.C. A dorm is a group quarters. So her address, she will not be counted as residing in East Fishkill. She'll be counted as residing in Washington, D.C., because on April 1st, she will put her head down in Washington, D.C. Okay? But my twin daughters are 26, and both of them are working on their PhDs. One's living in Utah, Salt Lake City, and one's living up in Massachusetts, up at Boston. And so neither one of them, I can't count either one of them because they live in private housing units. Okay? The one who's in Utah was home around Thanksgiving and asked, was I going to be home the next night? And I said, no, I have to go do a census presentation. And my 26-year-old daughter said to me, what's a census? All right, exactly. But think about it. 10 years ago, she was 16. She didn't have to fill out the census 10 years ago. Mom filled out the census for her 10 years ago. So when we think about responding to the census, I've already told you, we're worried about senior citizens filling it out. But we're also worrying about young adults because they may not have been taught by their schools about their responsibility as young adults to respond to the census. But it gets even worse, all right? So as I explained to this daughter, okay, about the census, and I explained you're going to get a letter in the mail with an invitation with a code to respond, she goes, Mom, what if I don't get mail? And I said, wait, why? So we started to talk about how the housing units get identified. I said, don't you have a dish? She goes, Mom, we don't watch TV. So I'm a little out of touch with young people, obviously. But so I come to find out my daughter lives in an illegal basement apartment. Yes, but it's cheap and it has a good yard for her dog. That's the priority for young people. So let me tell you a story about the other one. Her twin is in Massachusetts, in Boston. So her twin called me, I was talking to her last week, and she goes, Mom, I got the census. I said, no, you didn't. She said, yes, I got the census. She said it was in that pile of mail on the table that fell over because young people don't look at their mail. They do everything electronically. So we really, really have to get the message out to young people that they have to respond to the census. All right, particularly those that go to Dutchess Community College, particularly those that are students that may not reside in the dorms, okay? If they're not being counted with mom and dad, we have to make sure that they know they have to respond to the census. So when I explained to her that no, the census isn't out yet, we finally figured out that she actually got the American Community Survey data, and that's one of the things that Owen's gonna follow up with.
So one of the things to understand with the census is the decennial census every 10 years is the larger event. It is only 9 questions, as you can see the categories they ask you, and that is to do 100% of the population. Every 10 years we are supposed to get 100% count. In addition, there's the ongoing American Community Survey. So there can be some confusion with people understanding when they get which form, which one they're doing. Census, every 10 years, the decennial is only 9 questions. The American Community Survey is a longer form with much more detailed questions. For transportation planners, it asks things like, how do you get to work? How long did it take? Things of that information. That's where, for planners, We use it a lot to get more of the information about specifics in the population to help us plan how your community may grow or develop. It's a 5-year average of data. Takes a little more understanding of which ones you can use to compare. They also have 3-year and 1-year American Community Survey averages as well. So some some households will receive both. You do need to fill out both. All households should get the decennial census, the 9 questions. Some may, in addition, get the ACS survey.
So let's start with some basic census geography because that helps people understand the nature of the confidentiality of their data. So in the middle of the screen, we start with a census block. If I were to leave town, if I were to leave town hall, go to the next corner, which is probably going to be Route 82, make a right, and then make the next, eventually I would get a real census of block that we would be able to count a certain number of streets on, or a certain number of people on. But in many cases, people who live across the street, unless you're in a cul-de-sac, people who live across the street are in fact in another census block. So it's practically impossible to tell one household of data when you're on the block level, unless, of course, it's in like a house mixed in an industrial area or a very rural area, and there's very few houses there. But the Census Bureau really does not release very limited data at the block level. More generally, the data is released at the block group level, and a block group can have anywhere between 600 and 3,000 people in it, with an optimum size of about 1,500. CDBG, the Community Development Block Grant, and other data is released at the block group level, okay? But more people are more familiar with census tract level, and a census tract can have anywhere between 1,200 and 8,000 people in it, with an optimum size of about 4,000. So when I said starting March 20th, we'll be able to see data and the return rate of how the households are responding in those areas, it's going to be at the census tract level. How many census tracts in Dutchess? Do you know? Sorry, I don't mean to put them on the spot. So
96.
So why are we worried? You can cover, Luca.
So the Dutchess County Planning Department is called a local census data affiliate. As part of that responsibility, we review and update information for the census. In late 2018 summer timeframe, we were participating in what's called the local update of census addresses. We communicated to all the communities that we were going to take on that responsibility at the county level. And what we were asked to do by the Census Bureau is review their list of about 126,000 records, which were detailed as households in the county. Think of a household as 44 Queen Anne Lane, single-family house. But if you're in an apartment building, apartment 1 is a household, apartment 2 is a household. And when we did the review, we couldn't say at that address there's 6 apartments. We had to tell them that it's apartment A1, A2, A3, B2, B3, BC. So we were given a list of about 126,000 records from the Census Bureau. We compared that with our Dutchess County Real Property Service data. We also compared it against the state's state address master file, Central Hudson data, Central DMV data, and NICEC. So we had about 6 to 7 different data sets that we conflated to try and review those 124,000 records. We added somewhere between 8 and 16,000 records to that and asked them to correct about 100,000 records. There were little things that were wrong, mostly in the sub-address or that how many apartments. So we did a lot of work at the front end to ensure, hopefully, that the list of people that get the invitation to respond is as accurate as possible at the beginning. Because they're going to use the number that they've sent out to try and estimate if people do not respond. So doing that front end work hopefully gets us to the point that we do have as high a capability of getting the most responses.
And so I could tell you, in Westchester County, when our department did the Luca review, we actually found 24,000 housing units more than the Census Bureau had records for. So again, 24,000 is a huge number for us, and that raised a tremendous level of concern for us. But if the apartment's over the garage, if it's in the basement, we don't care if it's legal or not. And by the way, the planning departments are not allowed to share the data, the addresses that we found with local municipalities. We're prohibited. We're also covered under Title 13 of the U.S. Code. We are not allowed to share the data because at the same time that we don't care whether the housing unit, from the census perspective, is legal or not, we also don't care if the people who are living there are citizens or not. We want to count everybody that is living in this country on April 1st. That's our objective. That's what we're trying to do. Doesn't matter their citizenship. We're just trying to count people. So the second reason that we're really concerned is called the CBAM survey. That's the Census Barriers, Attitudes, and Motivators survey. So in advance of every decennial census, the Census Bureau sends out a survey, and in the summer of 2018, and they ask some general questions about your intents of responding to the census. So in the summer of 2018, they sent the survey out to 50,000 households. 17,500 households took the time to respond to this survey. Thank you. They did the same thing in 2008, and in 2008, 14% of the people who took the time to respond to the survey said they weren't going to respond to the census. In reality, 10% more did not respond to the census. All right, the response rate to the census paper forms was 76% across the country. It was 73% in Westchester. I don't know what Dutchess' response rate was, but but again, the national response, it was 10% more. They asked the same question in 2013, and 33% of the people who took the time to respond to this survey said they were not going to respond to the census. If we add another 10% onto that, that means 4 people in this town, 4 out of every 10 in this town, 4 out of every 10 in this county, 4 out of every 10 in this country will not be counted. That's crazy, exactly. That's why we're concerned. Now, they were asked, why aren't you going to respond to the census? It didn't. There you go. They were asked, one of the questions they were asked was, how familiar are you with the census? So again, these are people who took the time to respond. Only 79% of the people who responded said that they were at all familiar with the census. That's also concerning. 21% were on my 26-year-old daughter who didn't know what the census was. So they were asked why. Why would they not respond to the census? They don't care. They're concerns about data confidentiality and privacy, fear of repercussion, distrust of the government, and frankly, what's in it for me? Thank you. But they were also asked, what would motivate you to respond to the survey? And 94% of the people who responded said if it meant more money for health care, if it meant more money for their fire departments, they would respond. 85% said if it meant more money for their schools, they would respond. And 92% said if it was going to fix the potholes outside, they would respond. Thank you. So starting March 12th, the invitations to respond to the census are going out. All right, the first one is going to be a letter for 95% of the households in this country. It's going to be a letter with a 12-digit code across the top of it. And that 12-digit code is specific to each household. So if I had an apartment at my house, that apartment would have a different code. I don't have an accessory apartment at my house, let's be clear. All right, so anyway, but if you have it over the garage, if you're in the basement, it doesn't matter. Every apartment, every unit, housing unit will have a different 12-digit code. We don't know what these codes look like. The Census Bureau, to protect the system from scams, is not releasing what those codes are going to look like. But if you do not get a letter, if come April 1st your household has not received a letter, you can still respond to the census. You can go online, and it's just going to ask. You're just going to have to answer an additional questions about what are the cross streets of where you live. So you can still respond even if you don't get this code. But for our senior citizens, it will be much easier for them if they can call or they can go online. If they have that code, it will make it much easier. In fact, by April 1st, which is the official census day, most people will have gotten 3 letters from the Census Bureau, unless you respond early. As soon as you respond, you get taken off the list. Your code gets taken off the list, and you won't have to get additional letters. What we do tell people is if you do not want somebody knocking on your door, then the best thing to do is respond to the census. All right, if you don't respond, eventually they're going to start around the middle to end of April. They are going to start coming to your door. Now, the Census Bureau is hiring. They're actually, I don't know what they're paying up here, 21?
19.
$19 an hour, and they are looking for people who may work full-time. They're looking for people who can work nights and weekends because they want people who can go to people's homes when they are home. So they are, and in fact, the Census Bureau is having difficulty hiring right now. But the advantage of the fact that of people responding online, it will be that many fewer census takers that they'll need. Nationwide, they're looking to hire about 500,000 census takers, some for as little as 6 weeks. Thank you. So again, this is what it looks like. It is coming from Jeffersonville, Indiana. So the more that we can take this screen even and post it at the senior centers, if we can take this screen, post it at multifamily properties, and just let people know that that's the return address. Again, you get the sense of the fact that there's going to be, and your census ID is going to be some 12-digit code. All right, so responding, okay, we actually take you through just a little bit to see where it is. How do you, there's actually a training video online that you can go to the 2020census.gov site to be able to see the training video. This training video for how you respond to the census is not even 6.5 minutes long. So that should give you an idea to respond to the 9 questions on there. Shouldn't even take you 6.5 minutes because the training video is that long. But to the extent we really need local municipalities to let people know it's coming. One of the other things that we are encouraging is local municipalities to create census hubs, places where there are publicly available computers, so people who don't have internet service at their home or people who don't feel comfortable responding in their own home will have the ability to go to the library or to go to the senior center, or will be able to go somewhere where there will be publicly available computers for them to be able to respond to the census.
And our understanding is that all the libraries in the county have committed to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So they also have, the Census Bureau has 12 different language direct lines that the library or anyone else can call. And there's 12 different languages. They could walk people through the ability to respond to the census itself.
So as I mentioned earlier, that the county's planning departments are subject to Title 13, so we are all sworn to the U.S. Code. We're not allowed to release data even to you, but any data that is collected by the census takers, they are not allowed to share with anybody. Earlier on, when we talked about the fact that what's new for the census, you'll be responding online. This is the census, also the first census that the census takers will be able to knock on neighbors' doors and ask how many people live in that unit next to you. If they can't get a response, because while it is a count of the population, it is also a count of housing units, and they want to get a count of vacant housing units. One of our towns mentioned that they have a lot of people who have second homes in Florida, and on April 1st, they may not be back yet. So if they're not back on April 1st, they may very well be counted in Florida, and their home in the local town may actually be counted as a vacant housing unit. So that's one of the things that we are concerned about is if we, and I'm not sure we have a large population that are snowbirds, but we certainly do have some people.
Not here in East Fishkill, but
Right.
in the northern part of our county, we have a lot of second homeowners.
Yep. And yeah, so to the opportunity that we can encourage the schools, I actually did a presentation about a month ago to the school superintendents. So I did see Jose there and encouraged all the school superintendents to adopt Census Week. Nationwide, the Census Bureau is adopting the first week of March as Census Week. Keep in mind, in many places, you may have children who are legal, who may go home to parents who are not. And so to the extent that we can educate children, not only might we get a better response because they can go home and tell mom and dad how important it is to respond to the census, but we're also planning for the 2030 census by educating our young people now about the fact that when they are young adults, they need to respond to the census. But think about how you learn to recycle. I learned to recycle when my youngest daughter came home and said, "Mom, do you know how many water bottles there are in the ocean?" We learn to recycle because of our children. They can be strong motivators and strong educators and share in the responsibility of learning about the census for our adults. So we do encourage people that if people are knocking on your door, there are things that you should ask them to protect yourself. But you should also, they carry a logo bag, they carry an ID, so that makes sure people ask for that. You don't let people into your home. And then what they should not allow, and actually the Attorney General's office just this morning added additional ones to this. So if somebody asks you for a password, for a bank account number, for any kind of social security number, a credit card number, gift cards, donations, and they added on this morning your mother's maiden name. If somebody asks for your mother's name, it's not a real census taker. In fact, if you get a form or an email, if you get a form that's addressed to you by person, it's not the real form. If you get an email, it's not the real form. The Census Bureau doesn't have your name. All they have is your housing unit address. Senior citizens, to make sure they know if you get an email, I'll help you respond to the census, it's not real. We don't have contact information for people. So that's part of the message that we really need to get out. Now, late last fall, the Census Bureau, the census people were out double checking the addresses that our counties were walking around. They have told us that they are going to notify the police departments when they are ready to start going out, so that in case you start getting phone calls about is this person real, you will be able to say yes or no, whether you're aware of that. But they have told us, the community partnership specialists have told us that because they got so many requests from the local municipalities that they will be able to notify the local police the times when people will be around. All right, so I think that covers us. Questions?
Are you going to talk about the state program?
Go ahead.
So
Oh, yeah, you have to cover that one.
Yeah, the addition is the state added money in the 2020 budget, 2019 budget, depending on how you look at it, for community outreach to encourage participation and get as great a percentage rate as possible. They just released it in the past 2.5 weeks.
The information's still coming out.
We still don't have all of the details, but the county has to apply by March 3rd with a county application on how we're going to increase the outreach. 75% of that funding that we're supposed to receive has to be through not-for-profits. There are no hard-to-count tracts in East Fishkill, but the communities that do have hard-to-count not-for-profits to actually go out and actively knock on doors to encourage people and educate them about the census. So you won't see that happening in East Fishkill, but Fishkill and Wappinger both have hard-to-count tracts, as does Dover, City of Poughkeepsie, and Amenia, and North Beacon. So some communities are going to see that, but we're going to be doing advertising on all the county transit vehicles about the importance of the census. Obviously, we're pushing out social media, and we would encourage the municipalities to do that as well. The county website does have information on the census. We will be posting the link to the website to show you how the response rate is going in your community. I would venture to guess if we find communities are having a very low response rate, we might be nudging and asking for some more outreach to your constituency about participation in the census.
Questions?
So Norma, if you have 2 children living in your house, you cannot claim them as...
Are they going to be living in your house on Wednesday, April 1st? Okay, if they're away at school, they're considered group quarters. I guess I should have covered that. Group quarters, the census takers, the Census Bureau started counting in January. They actually have to get to the most remote places in Alaska and Maine where people don't have internet service and they don't have post office delivery, and they actually had to get to some of these villages while the water is frozen. So they did actually start counting the people in January. They are starting in February. Right now, they are starting to count group quarters, the dorms that I told you about. Those are also prisons, nursing homes, assisted living facilities, any type of residential, long-term care residential facilities, where in those cases a housing director or somebody at that facility can provide the data about all of those folks and who's living there and the information that they need related to that. So the group quarters, they're already starting to count those. So if you have children who are away at school, they get counted as a group quarter. But if they are locally going to college or they just reside in your home, they would get counted in your home. Okay? So the group quarters here, I'm not sure we actually, let me just talk about students as a general. In New York State, we actually benefit from students. Now, East Fishkill may not, because we have more students that go out, and we don't have a college with a dorm here. But actually statewide, more students come to New York than leave for school. We have many, many international students that are coming to the schools, particularly in New York City. So New York State as a whole benefits from students. Anything else? Any other questions? There's so much about this that we could just go on, but you know, it all depends on what's of.
We're planners.
Yeah, we got excited by this stuff.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you to the commissioners for that. We will be posting on our website, our Facebook pages for the town for information on the census. If you need any information that isn't provided on our sites, please call the town hall, call us, call my office, and I will get you the answers you need. Our second presentation will be by our town planner, Michelle Robbins. She will be going through our industrial land study that we've been working on for a while. Michelle?
Ready? Some of you will remember I was here in December. Excuse me, can you grab the microphone? Sure. So as some of you will remember, I was here in December just to go through the industrial land study that the town undertook last year, and also to talk a little bit about the zoning that we've created or drafted that came out of the industrial land study. So the first slide just shows the areas, the different industrial areas in the town of East Fishkill, and we've numbered them 1 through 8 on this map. And the first study area, so I'm just going to give you a little bit more detail. The last time I was here, I sort of discussed in general terms some of the zoning that was coming out of the industrial land study, but we've made a few tweaks. We've heard from some folks, and we've sort of are now. I've got a pretty good draft of the zoning, and we've actually also just very recently received some comments from Dutchess County, which we are currently responding to. So the recommendations for study area 1, which is the Sprout Creek Court, Nancy Court, Route 376 area, is to maintain Sprout Creek Court as an industrial district. It currently is zoned I3 and has a lot of industrial uses. It's this area here, and you can see it's pretty well developed. There's actually, some contractors, landscaping business and some contractors' yards there. So we're considering, since it's pretty well tucked away from anything that would be sort of any uses that would be harmed by the stuff going on there, we're sort of thinking that's a good spot for some of these industrial uses, and we may just maintain that. So the question is if we allow it as of right, or if we consider allowing it only by special permit. I think one of the county comments actually was to maybe consider some areas in town where we would allow the contractors' yards as of right, and we'll have to consider that. But right now, we also want to make a differentiation between vehicle storage and contractors' yards. There's a bunch of people asking for contractors' yards, which usually includes material storage and maybe even some processing of materials. They typically are louder and have more issues with neighbors. But the vehicle storage can just be as simple as somebody needing a place that has a tree business, but they need a place to locate their vehicles, and that is not as difficult a use to live near. So we may actually differentiate between those two and define them differently. Another consideration is also whether or not, if you have a vehicle storage or a contractor's yard, in the past sometimes we would have required them to have had a building, so they actually had their business physically there. We're playing around with that as well in the special permit language. Another area that we're sort of thinking that we may allow to remain industrial would be like Nancy Court and the Commerce Court section of 376. for lighter industrial uses. We probably would not consider allowing contractors' yards there, but we may consider allowing an automotive use, for instance, that is enclosed, like a tire place that has all the uses within an enclosed garage and has some sales associated with it. We also are looking to revise the permitted uses in the I3 zone to get rid of the more hardcore industrial uses and maybe add some additional light industrial uses that would be compatible with a commercial business district. And then we're also considering rezoning a number of I3 properties along the Route 376 corridor to potentially a new B3 mixed-use district, which would permit second and third floor residential uses above commercial as of right. We would try to phase out automobile uses in those areas and allow light industrial compatible with commercial to exist. So that's the study area 1. Study area 2 is Ryan Drive. This one is pretty much, we haven't made too many changes from when I was last presenting. We'll probably grandfather the existing uses and then rezone the industrial properties to more of a mixed use. This is a kind of a strange industrial district that is now currently surrounded by all residential uses. So over time, it's been slowly converting into more commercial uses. There's a doctor's office back there. A gymnastics school was there at one point, but there also is this legacy of these Ryan Drive uses, which have contaminated some of the area here. So we've got a bunch of different things going on, and we think that basically because of all the residential uses located around it, it may be best to sort of move this into the direction of a commercial use. The next area is study area 3, which is the Hopewell Hamlet. We are seriously looking at rezoning a lot of the properties along Route 376 and north of Route 82 to the Hamlet Center. So it would be kind of this area here, kind of around the depot, where we would hopefully create a new district called the Hamlet Center District and try to create a village center in this location. We would consider allowing second and third floor residential uses above commercial as of right. We would permit public parking, encourage walkability with our zoning, and adopt potentially design guidelines for the Hamlet Center, which would include signage, probably, as well as potentially even some architectural guidelines. The Stormville Airport area, this is just one parcel. It's currently zoned I1. We're thinking of rezoning this area to a conservation residential district, which is a district that already exists in our code. We would probably make a few tweaks to it. We'd allow permitting commercial uses up to 5%. Currently, it's 1% in the code. We might consider a density incentive for active recreation. So if, for instance, you could get maybe 100 units, if you laid it out in the typical CRD way, if you added perhaps sports fields, maybe you could increase the density somehow. To allow more units, and also maybe if we could allow a density bonus if a certain amount of the land is maintained as open space or for agricultural uses, which could include things such as wineries or apple orchards. The idea here is that this is a beautiful spot, and we might want to protect some of the view shed of here, but we also want to get some economic development out of the site. So perhaps we could figure out a way of making it do both. And also maybe some sort of event space in that location. Packaged pavement area, we're just going to maintain the industrial zoning and then consider a buffer requirement to the residential properties, which are largely back up in here. But that hasn't changed since you last saw it. This area of Jackson Farm is zoned industrial, but almost all of these parcels, with the exception of 2, are currently under a conservation easement. So I think it's these 2 that are not, because they have an agricultural processing plant on them right now. So what we would probably do is maybe allow this area or have some sort of thing in the zoning which would allow portions of the R1 district to permit agricultural uses and processing and active farms. But pretty much those would be rezoned to R1. Limekilm Road, We think that this area should maintain its I-1 zoning. This is one of the areas where we may consider permitting contractors' yards and storage yards. I don't know if we would do it as of right or by special permit, but that's something we're talking about right now. And maybe we would differentiate between the storage and the processing of materials because of the noise and visual impacts. But this area here is largely separated from any residential uses, and it has easy access onto 84, so it makes sense to allow trucking and other sorts of industrial uses in this area, which are currently allowed now. The Shenandoah area, a lot of this area is Shenandoah Road. There's a lot of homes that currently have industrial zoning. All of these parcels are industrially zoned, but they're actually residential parcels by use and farms. So the thought here would be to rezone all those properties along Shenandoah Road to R1. There's also a parcel that's PCP. That parcel actually has frontage on Limekilm, so potentially we could rezone that one to an I1 to make it consistent with the rest of the parcels I showed you in the previous slide, and then require any industrial parcel abutting Shenandoah Road. If there's any that, there's a couple of parcels back here that could have access to Shenandoah Road to maintain a 75-foot landscape buffer and or berm, so that you would have, Shenandoah Road would be visually protected. And finally, one of the other recommendations that we've been talking with the county and the agricultural folks about is to consider allowing tax-exempt agricultural parcels of at least 15 acres to lease up to, and this is something where right now we've got 10% in there, but it could be more, it could be less, of acreage to contractors for vehicle storage by special permit. We'd want to, of course, require screening in the zoning, limit the acreage. We probably would not want to allow any material storage, and we would want to consider the impact of the truck traffic on the surrounding residential uses. But this is something that's been, I've heard, has been well received by some of the local farmers, and it helps them, potentially bring a little bit of income in, but also helping some of the contractors that need places to store their vehicles. So that's it. Oh, yeah, so we did receive a bunch of Dutchess County comments. I'm currently looking through them right now. A lot of them are sort of housekeeping stuff just in the way the draft code was written, but they're, I think some of their significant comments where they want us to continue working with the agricultural, Dutchess County agricultural group to sort of hammer out the best way of approaching this potential special permit, but also the as-of-right contractors' yards they want us to look at potentially in certain locations, so we'll look at that. There's a bunch of other, they want us to come up with some more bulk regulations for one of the districts that we're creating in the hamlet. So that's about it.
Thank you, Michelle. Well, like I said, we've been working on this now for a little over 9 months. And this is I believe, your second presentation on this. I just wanted to give another overview of it. The town board will be discussing it again next month. And besides that, anything else, Michelle, to add?
No, I mean, I think if anybody has any thoughts about any of the things that we're considering and have strong opinions one way or the other, it'd be great to hear from you and let me know, just because we're sort of, looking at some of the stuff, and if anyone has any thoughts or ideas, it'd be great.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you for joining us for this workshop. We will adjourn now, and we will be going right into our voting meeting. So thank you very much.